there's a concept of the idea of the point of entry into an image. Okay, what is it that we first look at in an image, and where is it that our eye rests? When we look at any given image, what is it that we look at first, and where is it that our eye rests? Okay, so the rules are quite simple. The first rule is that if there's a person in the image, yeah, we will look at the person. Okay, if there are, if we can see the person clearly, then we will look at their face, and if we can see their face clearly, then we will look at their eyes. Okay, that's when there are people involved in the image. Graphically, if we have a light image, the thing that our eye is going to go to quickest is going to be the dark part of the image, a small dark part of the image. And if it's a predominantly dark image, our eye is going to go to a small light part of the image. Let's just look at this very quickly. In regards to, these are images of people where people are actually a small part, but you'll notice that your eye immediately falls on the person. No matter how small a part of the image, that's exactly where your eye will go to. Okay? These are images where we can see the person, so our eye immediately goes to their face. You're aware of that? It's very obvious that we don't pay attention to these things necessarily, but it's very obvious when you are paying attention to it. And these are images where we can see the face very clearly, and you'll notice that your eye is immediately drawn to the eyes without any question, yeah? The overriding rule in regards to this idea of point of entry is what's considered the sharpest part of the picture. Now here we can see our eye is immediately attracted to the girl to the right side, and secondly attracted to the girls on the left. Okay, we can see that we're looking now at the lady taking the picture as opposed to the kid in front of us. And here, even though we've got guys in front who are bigger, more dominant, we can see that our eye is very much attracted to the guy at the end. Okay, over here our eye is pulled over to the wine spilling, and over here to the guy. It takes a second for us to work it out, but then our eye rests over here. Okay, we're obviously looking at the girl on the left, in the middle. Okay, and even though we have two, this is a great illustration, even though we have two guys in the front here, we can see that our eye is being magnetically drawn to this guy in the background. So sharpness overrides all the rules that we've just learned. This is a great image that demonstrates this very much. Okay, the first thing that our eye goes to is the bride's face, but then immediately our eye gets attracted over to this area here. Even though this is a face and a person, it's predominant and it's a light part against the dark part, etc., we can see that our eye is magnetically drawn to the sharpest part of the image. Okay, the sharpest part of the image is what our eye finds to be the most pulling part of the image. We're going to discuss now a rule called the rule of thirds. Okay, the question is, why does this rule, we're going to discuss what it is in a second, but why is it? Before we discuss what it is, the question is, why is it? There's a rule called the rule of thirds, okay? And it's fundamental to the beauty. The reason why this rule works is just the same way as gravity works, because that's how it is. Yeah, it's a reality in the world, okay? Look, the rule of thirds basically dictates that when we look at any given image, our eye divides the image into kind of like a checkerboard, yeah, into 9 equal parts. And these lines here, and especially these cross sections, are very fundamental to the structure of the image. And if we have our subject moving, remember we discussed about tensions earlier, that if the subject is moving into this side of the image, that adds a lot to the image. For example, this image, we can see the third intersects his face, we can see the third intersects the bride, again the third intersects his face over here. Now, the reality is, to go a little bit deeper into this rule of thirds, is it isn't actually about putting things on the third. Although that really does work, as we can see, yeah, it's not actually about putting things on the third. The rule of thirds is actually a fundamental truth in regards to having the image, the elements of the image have a relationship to this grid. So when we put something on a third, then the elements of the image, the lines and the shapes of the image have a relationship to this grid. However, what about this image where we didn't actually put anything on a third at all, and it's actually centered, but we can see that it has a relationship to this grid. Okay, here we go. We put something on the third, and also something here on the third. Again, this image is without being on the third, but the shapes and the lines of this image have a relationship to this grid. So to here, how could this image be a little tighter?
The man on the left.
This dude on the side, if he moved a little bit further in, yeah, exactly. Okay. So that's the rule of thirds in a nutshell. There's a lot to talk about in regards to the rule of thirds. We're going to get into that a little bit later on. Let's look over here now. This is a picture of my daughter Esther. What do we think of this picture? Let's discuss how it works. What's the first thing we look at?
Eyes.
Her eyes, her face, for sure, no question. Okay, now what happens to our eye according to everything that we just learned? Right now, the point of entry is around here. Yeah? Now what's happening to our eye?
She's looking towards.
She's coming this way, she's looking this way, but there's an imaginary line coming down. By the way, the direction of her face is always downwards. Yeah, when we look at the eyes, then we look at the nose and mouth, that's the direction of the face. The direction of this image comes like this, and by the time our eye gets to over here, we've kind of lost interest, and we're then going backwards back to the subject. Okay? So you can see our eye comes in here, comes around, and back. Okay? And all in all, this ends up as a very balanced, very beautiful image. Yeah? What image do we prefer? A or B? Who prefers A? Who prefers B? Anyone prefer B? No, I've showed this image to hundreds of people. I've never ever had somebody prefer image B to image A. Okay? Why? What's the point of entry in this image? Again, the eyes. It's exactly the same point of entry. But now what happens in this image is your eye comes into the same place, and your eye takes the same journey, and it goes bang. Okay? But your eye comes down through, your eye comes in, the point of entry is again her face, the eye comes down here and goes doing into the side of the frame, and that creates like a jarring kind of feeling in your shoulders. And that takes away from the relaxation and the beauty of the image. Okay? When we look at this image, we can see which image do we prefer, B or C?
C.
B or C?
C.
Yeah, so what's the difference between B and C?
Her eyes.
Is really her eyes. What are her eyes doing?
Towards away.
So, well, they're actually coming back this way, so it reduces this banging into the side of the frame, and now our eye is actually moving over this way, so we don't have that jarring feeling like we do over here. Okay? So everyone prefers A, and then C, and then B. What do people think of this image?
It's nice.
It's a nice picture. It works. Yeah, everyone agrees that it works? Okay, why does this image work and this image, everyone agreed, does not work? Yeah, everyone hears the question? This image does not work, no one liked this image, but this image does work, according to everybody. Why? What's the difference between these two images?
It suits
Oh,
the situation.
excellent. Okay. It suits the situation. Look at this picture. This picture is of a gorgeous little girl. I mean, she's mine, so she's a little bit more gorgeous, yeah? But she's a gorgeous little girl, gorgeous cheeks, with a soft, fluffy, pink. Everything about this picture is just gorgeous and cute and, yeah?
Yeah.
Everything about this picture is dramatic and dynamic and hard. You've got these strong lines, Yeah, very sharp lines, a sharp nose. You've got strong contrasts. Yeah, you've got vertical lines. Remember, you said vertical lines are more dynamic than horizontal lines. Everything about this image is dramatic and intense. So now our eye comes in here and goes bang into the side of the frame. But just like Pearlie said, this kind of dynamic bang tension actually suits the image. Whereas the dynamic tension here does not suit the image. So for these two pictures, we'll see that this picture, where we don't have that kind of dynamic bang, works better when we've got space. And this image, where everything is intense and dynamic, works better when we do have that dynamic bang. Now, in regards to portrait photography, regular family portrait photography, what would you think would be our more likely kind of composition? A or B? A or B? Yeah. So when we're taking regular portrait photography, family portrait photography, I would say 90%, 95% of the images should be following this rule as opposed to this rule, okay? In weddings, when there's a lot more dynamic energy going on, I use this rule a lot more, the idea of the rule of your eye banging into the side of the frame, creating more dynamic tension. I use that much more. But in family portraiture, when we're dealing with kids and groups of people who are close to each other, I'm much more edging towards the idea of having space for our eye to move around. So now how does it work with this picture? What happens here? What's the point of entry? Her eyes, yeah? Now what happens?
Down along the veil.
So really she's looking this way, yeah? But, just like you said, is we have a line coming backwards, so the tension, although we have a tension here, we don't bang so hard into the side of the frame because we have a tension pulling us back to the right side, which means this image has a dynamic tension, but it's tempered. Yeah, just like the image of Esther when she was looking back to this side, but this is a bit more, this is used in a bit more of an intelligent way. Now these are good examples as well. What's happening in this image? Where's our point of entry?
Her face
Her face. Now what happens?
goes down. Her arm
Comes down this line here, and now what happens?
look along the rest of the image.
Where does the eye go to from here? What's the next interesting part? The flowers. The flowers have a tension. So now our eye, for sure, no one looks at the flowers first. We look at the bride first. Our eye comes down here. Our eye comes back to the flowers and back to the bride. So we have a very intelligent composition where our eye, it kind of grazes. It doesn't actually, it can get a lot closer to this, but it comes close to the edge, which adds a tension, but actually gets sucked back to the flowers and comes back, which means this image has an energy. It has a subtle energy, but not an energy like that image where our eye just goes bang, okay? Everyone's clear on this? Whereas this image here has much less of a tension. Do you see how we've created a tension graphically? And over here, the image is much less tense. Which picture do we prefer? A or B? A, B, A, B, A. That's the majority of people I've shown this picture to prefer A. Okay? Now, just to show this and to bring the concept home, this is an image. The girl is looking off to the right side of the camera, and we're having this bang. This is a very intense, hard texture, okay, which creates a tension and energy. And she's looking off to the side, which is creating quite a tense feeling. Now she's looking at me, but she's still looking, her face is turned towards the side. Now we relax the tension, and then we have her smile, which goes with the tension. So this image here, where we've got a strong tension, I've posed her, I've had her expression in a way that goes with it, and as we create the tension, we change the tension, then this expression goes with the image. Understand? Okay. Two very important rules in regards to adding to the image is clearing space and cropping in close. Now, clearing space is quite obvious. Let's just look here. Is there anything distracting us in this picture?
Yeah.
See, once it's gone. Yeah, the thing hanging from the side. That's taking away from the image. What about this picture?
The thing in the back.
Stroller in the back. Okay, makes a difference. Okay,
Sign in there.
there's no smoking sign. Okay. Now those are images where I just moved myself. These are images where we removed it in Photoshop. But look at the difference between these two images. How much more power is added to the image when we get rid of something else that's vying for our attention. Okay, what's distracting us here? See the curtains in the back, that little chink of black? Okay, little girl in the background. Okay, this we removed in Photoshop. Okay, this is just for the other day. Look what happened here. Ching. Okay, that's my mum and dad. Just the difference between creating the background to be solid. What's distracting here?
The thing on his finger.
Yeah, you will be held accountable for stuff like that, by the way, as a portrait photographer. Okay, he was holding his tie. So I was like, do you mind just putting your tie in your pocket? Thank you. Okay, guy in the background, etc. Okay, so a very fundamental part of getting the eyes and attention on the subject is make sure that in the background there's nothing distracting. That's number one. Number two is called cropping in close. Now, cropping in close is actually very interesting because cropping in close does not mean that we are taking a close-up. Let's look at these three pictures here. Are we cropped in close? Cropping in close, you could also kind of translate that in a way as getting rid of any extraneous space. Okay, is there any extraneous space in this image? Remembering that we can't get away from a square kind of rectangular shape. If we could like crop it out like that, then there would be none. But understanding that we can't get away from a rectangular shape as a photograph. Is there any extraneous space in this image? We have to identify what's this a picture of. It's a picture of her torso and her arms. So in regards to this is the information that I want to show, look how close we are in, there's absolutely no extraneous space. Now we're taking a different picture of the girl. Okay, this is now a picture of her face and her hair. And again, we've got no extraneous space. And now this is a picture of her face. So to crop in close does not mean that it has to be a close-up. Cropping close just means that there's no extraneous space. Now, for example, is this image considered cropped in close? Is there any extraneous space? So we could crop in a little closer with this picture. But what about this image? Is this image considered cropped in close? So it actually is, because all of this stuff around here, as in my opinion, as the photographer, I've decided it's also integral to the image, just like the subject is integral to the image. That's the rules of cropping close. Now, cropping in close, what it basically does is adds two eyes. It adds intensity and intimacy to an image. Now watch this. I've just selected a few images to crop in. Let's look at the difference between this image here, and now let's crop in really close. Okay, let's look at the two differences. Look at the difference between the intimacy and the intensity. Okay, let's look at the next image. Okay, look at the difference between the intimacy and the intensity in image 2 compared to image 1. Yeah? And look at this. This is a gorgeous example. We could do this in a few ways. Let's first crop it like this. Actually, no, let's crop it like this. Look at the difference between that image, which is a nice picture, but that image, much, much, much more intimate. Okay? And also here, difficult to use the words intimate and intense in this picture here, but we understand the idea. We understand the idea. Class 2, Chapter 1, point of entry, rule of thirds, cropping in close. Point of entry is dealing with where does our eye go to first in the image and where does it settle. If there are people, we look at the people. If we see the people clearly, we look at their faces. If we see a face clearly, we go to the eyes. If it's a primarily bright image, we look at a small dark part and vice versa. The overriding rule in regards to point of entry is the sharpest part of the image. Our eye is magnetically drawn to the sharpest part of the image. Rule of thirds, we take our frame, we divide it into 9 equal parts. We end up with 4 lines and 4 cross sections. Our image needs to bear, the elements of the image, the underlying geometric structure, needs to have a relationship to those 4 lines and those 4 points. Cropping in close provides us with the 2 eyes, intimacy and intensity.